Okay, so welcome to EZConvos. This is our number 10, and the topic today will be around the coronavirus, COVID-19. So I will put it over to our one and only Philip, aka Insurrection, to take over and moderate for this session.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for introducing us, and thanks for letting us have this great conversation. We're going to be talking about COVID. And the question really is this a serious pandemic, or is this some kind of elaborate hoax perpetrated by what seems to be the elitist cabal? If you look at some of the facts in a vacuum, then maybe you might be like, yeah, I mean, this is a genuine virus, something's cropped up. But when you start connecting the facts, the story doesn't seem to be that straightforward. So I thought we can have a conversation today. We can present some facts about this whole story and see what everybody has to say, what everybody else's views are. I'm personally quite into conspiracies, you could say. I'm quite open about that. So yeah, I've got a couple of points I'd like to cover. I think that'd be really interesting. But I think we can just get everybody to have a little introduction and say, or maybe first I'll introduce what I think. So in my opinion, this virus, it really, a lot of the facts don't add up. It seems really fishy. You've got virologists, for example, Judy Mikovits, who's in this documentary called Plandemic. She's been studying virology for like 30 or 50 years or something like that. She's really a specialist, and she says that a virus, the COVID virus, would have taken 800 years to evolve on its own in nature. If you look at the SARS virus from 2008, a lot of the genetics have been changed very drastically in a very short period of time, which wouldn't happen in nature. So the thesis is that this virus must have come from something like a virology lab, which we know that there are plenty of virology labs. In fact, there's one in Wuhan, which is where the virus supposedly started. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about like lockdowns. Japan and Sweden, they had no lockdowns, but they only had a few hundred deaths. The masks, now everybody's crazy about these masks. Do they help? Don't they help? Have we got this kind of grassing thing where people, oh, you don't have a mask, you're a bad person? They're kind of, making people feel bad for not wanting to wear a mask. Also, the media, what are the media doing? Are they helping the situation? Or are they creating a panic? At the same time, we've also got paedophilia rings being busted. Ghislaine Maxwell was taken into custody last year. Jeffrey Epstein was supposedly killed himself. Prince Andrew also. So it seems like the elite cabal, they're having their story being destroyed. So maybe they launched a virus on the public to put everyone into a panic frenzy so we wouldn't be able to think about the pedophilia thing. That's my point of view. Thank you for listening. I would like to jump into hear what the other people on the call have to say. So who wants to go first?
So I guess I'll just begin and just say, like, regarding the whole COVID situation, again, like, to some degree, I'm largely ignorant, like many people are. But at the same time, I would take a very open approach to at least just listening, both to the scientists, both to the medical professions, and other experts, because a lot of the research and stuff that I've looked into of this, there seems to be a lot of conflicting views. So there isn't one set of this is, especially like, for example, the origins, as you mentioned, whether it came from Wuhan, the laboratories, whether it's down to, bad, poor practices regarding hygiene and foods and bacteria stemming and spreading. I'm not too sure. But at the same time, again, I think the whole point is just to talk, to see if people have good links or good ways to persuade. I'd definitely take an open approach to that. But I'd also say, when it comes to things like masking, quarantine procedures, measures, etc., it's interesting to see, especially like the spikes or the death tolls in certain countries, and how it's been, limited or pretty much non-existent in others because of very good proactivity and, being very proactive when it comes to locking down, implementing measures, etc., etc. So yeah, that's pretty much my view. Open to be persuaded if the evidence is good enough.
Well, I hope to be presenting a lot of evidence today. Who wants to go next?
Well, I mean, I'm being open-minded about this whole coronavirus pandemic. I mean, what's impossible and what's not, right? They got fucking labs cloning animals, bro, and shit like that. So what's to think that they can't come up with a virus on this scale? So I'm just open-minded about all of it. Nothing's impossible. Everything's possible.
Well, if I can say my point, you're very well spoken. I can't speak like you guys do, but that's a Swedish thing. I'm going to try to explain how I feel. You all guys know how Sweden have approached this pandemic with like a calm recommendation state of it. But how it then is that it is a virus and it is here and it's spreading and it's obviously a little bit more aggressive. And if we look to the viruses that we have had through the times, we had Spanish flu, smallpoxes, rabies, dengue, the influenza with the Z, Ebola, then we have SARS, and then we have MERS, and then comes this SARS-CoV-2, that is COVID-19. All of those viruses I have said now is like years back, has been through, and they are all coming from, as they say, from bats, from mosquitoes, from animals, from bats to animal to human and stuff like that. And the conspiracy about this lab in China, in Wuhan, I'm thinking like this. If they are doing research and making stuff with bats there, and then you look at their animal markets, have you seen the animal markets, how they are handling these wild animals and stuff like that? And I think this can be, I don't think it's a hoax that we have the virus here. I think it's more that we are panicking because it spreads faster than the others through the world. Do you guys know what I mean? It went faster than if you just had it on one place. So yeah, I can tell more about how Sweden have had it when we come to that.
Yeah, it's got a very high infection rate, which apparently makes this virus quite unique in that sense. It spreads fast, and also the other thing about it is that it doesn't have very many indicators. Like you could have it and not show a single symptom, or you could have it and get very sick and have an infection in your lungs and die. Jono, do you want to jump on? Or BA?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, can you guys hear me properly?
Yes, perfect.
Cool. I guess my point, two things really. So the first point would be in regards to the masks themselves and how much of a protection they actually offer, right? So I think it's fair to say that the standard masks that you see people wearing in the open, 99% of people, like made from a bit of tissue in many cases, don't prevent coronavirus from being spread, right? I think there's specific types of masks. So there's one called an N95, which is it's really hard to come by, but a lot of people do have them. It's more like a professional surgical kind of mask that's hard to get, but they do filter out 95% of particles or viruses of a certain diameter, a certain size, and those have been conclusively proven to, prevent diseases or prevent spreading or getting diseases. However, in the case of most people, us here, the masks we'd be able to get access of are not going to be of that caliber, right? I think it's not so much a case of the masks being this myth being perpetrated that masks will prevent you from getting it or prevent you from passing it. I think it's more to do with if there's a possibility of reducing the spread, even if it's a small possibility, right? So I think of masks as more of an add-on, a bolt-on service, more as opposed to a means of preventing spreading it, right? So if you take the necessary precautions, you keep your distance, you don't cough in public, all of that stuff. I think a mask is like a nice addition to that. So even if you were to sneeze, not everything is going to be prevented by the mask, but like a whole lot of the junk that you'll sneeze will be prevented. It will stay in the mask. So even if it's just you with the infection, if that possibility exists, even no matter how small it is, that you've reduced the risk, I think it's something that is worth taking, which is why my thoughts on the conspiracy thing, it could be, but until I see conclusive proof that there's like a correlation between the paedophile rings being exposed and them using this as like an opportunist moment for them to kind of deflect the attention from them, I'm going to be skeptical about it. But that's my stance.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that, Jonathan. I think the last person to chime in is Bethany Ann. So,
hiya. I know I had a friend who is from the Netherlands, and she was very much on the view that it was a hoax, even though she was here in New Zealand, and we tackled it really well. But that could have been because New Zealand never saw like the harsh reality of it. She was on the belief that Bill Gates was behind it, and he was the one who sort of like released the virus, and at the same time, he's the one who was looking for a vaccine. And she said from her family back home in the Netherlands, they were saying that it was a way of like silencing free speech. So if anyone put their opinions out on social media regarding the coronavirus, they would have the police come over and they would be arrested or something. She also mentioned the fact that when these deaths are reported, not just in the Netherlands, but in other countries, it always comes under coronavirus. And she said they don't look at other reasons behind. So like if people had like heart problems or asthma, so it's trying to make people think that it's a lot worse than what it really is. I do think that it needs to be taken seriously. When it first came out, everyone sort of laughed it off, and it was like compared to like a common cold. However, when you look at Spain, they seem to be having like a second wave of it. So yeah, it's a little bit funny like that.
Well, absolutely.
But yeah, that's just my thoughts for now.
okay, thank you, Bethany Ann. So, just listening to what you guys have said, I've just taken some notes, so we're going to go back on what people have mentioned. One point I'd like to make just straight off the bat with Bethany Ann's point about Spain and the second wave is one of the virologists I was listening to said something along the lines of viruses adapt in different environments, in different hemispheres, right? So if you've got something that's more adapted for hot climates around the equator, that virus wouldn't have the same effectiveness in somewhere that was in the far north or in the far south of the planet, because that virus isn't adapted to survive in that climate. So that makes you think, wait, this virus, which is apparently the same one around the world, has about the same infection rate in the more hot countries and the more cold countries. That makes it a little bit fishy. I don't know if you guys heard about that, and does anyone have anything to say about that? But yeah, besides that, anyone got any? Yeah?
I mean, you make a unique point on that. I didn't really think about that being an aspect of this whole COVID situation. I mean, yeah, you take something outside of an element, you throw it into a different element, like everything's going to change. There's no way it can possibly mutate or just hold its same form. I mean, for example, if you're planting some vegetables or something, right? You plant that shit in some volcanic soil, they're going to blossom, and they're going to blossom fast, but you put them in different kind of soil, it's going to take a long time before you see them get to the point like the ones in better soil have. So you make a really good point.
It's true.
Yeah, thanks. I heard that. I was obviously really interested in this. I am really interested in this subject, and I listened to a couple of different podcasts and a couple of different like speakers and stuff on social media. And that fact kind of was a head scratcher, because you think, okay, that's true, right? Viruses adapt. Creatures, birds, and animals and insects all adapt for their climate. So how, if we've got this COVID-19, which is supposedly one strain, it should be dying out in like hot climates and surviving in the cold climates, or the other way around? It shouldn't be a universal or worldwide thing. That's what's a bit suspicious.
But that's the thing, though. Like, I don't know, like how much of that might be true, because I know that in terms of like it adapting, and like I don't know if it tends to be a lot more prevalent in like more drier type countries, as opposed to, for example, places like the Seychelles, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, Mongolia. They have like literally 0 deaths, or very, very little deaths in those countries. Because if you remember a while ago, there seemed to be a lot of reports coming out saying that sunlight, I don't know how much there's any truth in this, I don't know, whether high doses of vitamin D and sunlight can actually repel and kill off a lot of the coronaviruses, but then that seemed to be very stifled, and you don't really hear that anymore either. So,
well, sunlight
I think
does kill.
It's also worth taking into account that Spain is quite a coastal country, and given the temperature and the plenitude of beaches that there are in Spain, I think even if it were a cold country, if people are congregating in huge numbers, if it's a beach or if it's a mountain range, for example, I think a second spike isn't necessarily indicative of something with the environment, but perhaps more so with a more relaxed kind of approach, or how people are in general. Spain tends to be a very kind of chill place, and maybe people are congregating in mass numbers, as we've seen in Britain, for example, in Bournemouth Beach, and some of the numbers have gone up in those kind of surrounding areas apparently as well. But maybe you're right as well, to be fair. I think we know so little about it, right?
It is also a country, Spain there. It's also a country where many people travel to on vacations from other parts of the world. So it's going to be like more mingling in those places, I guess.
Yeah, pretty interesting points. I think it would be interesting if we could like actually understand the dynamics of this virus like really deeply. Do things like environment really affect it? But again, one of the points I think we were going to go into as well is like how the media is covering the subject, because what really baffles me is how the media just says wear a mask, social distance, stay at home, and there's no talk about raising your immune system. We have an immune system. It's designed to fight viruses. Okay, fair enough. Old people or people who are immune system compromised, yeah, serious issue. We should be concerned about that. Those people are much more at risk. But for the, 90%, I hope, 95%, hopefully, of people who are in good health, we should be talking about raising your immune system. What raises your immune system? Vitamin C, ginger, turmeric? Is that true, or is that nonsense? Are there different herbs?
That's very true. You mentioned that a while ago, actually, and that's something I've always agreed with you on. Yeah, there hasn't been enough exposure on how to increase your immune system. It's just been a case of stay at home, avoid everyone forever for the rest of your life. That's it. It's like that's not going to serve you in the long term. If this thing happens again, you need to be prepared for it, both provisionally as well as boosting your immune system. So 100% agree.
Well, they have said the virus are more aggressive from people that has already bad health, and people that are overweight, people that are middle-aged and maybe not taking care of themselves as much. Of course, I think every bacteria or virus or anything is going to hit those people the worst. That is not like rocket science. Everybody knows that. So if you're healthy from the ground, you have more you're gonna have more resistance for shit like this.
Yeah, and
Well, I
yeah,
mean,
sorry.
if you boost your immune system, just make sure it's where it's at, then this whole coronavirus won't be happening. I mean, Wim Hof, for example, that dude injected himself with poison and turned his immune system on, and he didn't die. Like 5 minutes later, this dude was still good. He had no signs of like his body dropping or any vital organs like giving out. I mean, if you wake up people to the fact that their immune system can cure them of any ailment, it'll be a massive blood of pharmaceuticals. And we'll start getting people to question, like, what else are they not telling me? Is there actually like a cure for cancer? And just that alone, it will like empower people and just really fuck up the government in terms of money. And, pharmaceuticals, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Who's going to want to let billions go like that?
Yeah, that's a very good point about the pharmaceutical industry. And I mean, as I said earlier, it's about like there's a lot of these dots, a lot of these little facts that we're discussing. This. In a vacuum, if it was just there's a virus, then I'd be much more like, well, maybe. But when you look at all of these individual facts together and you start to draw a picture between them, it kind of makes it like that's what really gets me like questioning things. I can't hear the narrative and just nod my head and tacitly agree. To me, it's like, okay, I can agree with this and this, but then why aren't we talking about the immune system, for example? This pharmaceutical thing, right? Wim Hof, great example. I've been like looking into chi energy, which I know it sounds quite quacky, but we look at something as simple as the placebo effect. The placebo effect's been puzzling scientists for ages, and the reason is because you give someone a sugar pill and say it's a headache fixing medication and it works. So that means that the human mind is powerful enough to fight disease. We've seen that with Wim Hof. He's proving the same thing. And like chi energy is a study that's been around for 8,000 years in China. And you have, chi masters who, well, loads of really random stuff if you go into that kind of field. But if we stick to COVID, yeah, I mean, why aren't we talking about, I mean, I guess that's the whole kind of mind frame of our society right now. We're in a societal position where we kind of, we do rely on pharmaceuticals, and it seems to be an agenda to make us dependent on the system rather than being independent and not being victims to this virus. Because I think that's another little strain of this. It's like, we can't beat this virus on our own. We're disgusting humans. We cough and we sneeze and we need to wear masks and gloves because we're dirty. But if you get a vaccine, if you hand sanitize with these things that are not from your body, then you're going to be okay. Well, but we have an immune system, so that's my position.
Yeah, I mean, like the point that aspects made regarding the pharmaceuticals is good, because it ties in with so many things, especially mental health and certain drugs in the industry, and as you said, them trying to make things or keep things a certain way so they're making money. So it makes you question. But in regards to the question regarding like boosting immunity and ways that people, whether it's having more antioxidants or vitamins, the thing about that is there seems to be a lot of contradictory data again. So for example, there was one account from a doctor called Anthony Cardillo, and he showed that through studies coming out of China early on regarding the corona, he realized that the sickest patients with the longest duration of the illness, they tended to have the lowest levels of vitamin D. So then he came to the idea that, if you can boost your vitamin D, go out, get more sunshine, that's going to help that. There was some other...
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, can you hear me?
No.
Yeah, we lost you, Patrick.
Okay, oh, sorry about that. I know that the BBC had a few articles and accounts regarding this topic as well, and they were also skeptical about it, feeling that a lot of these new ways of potentially boosting your immune system were just kind of new guises for just snake oil salesmen to just sell their products, to put out new merchandise So, susceptible people who would go out and would do this, and ultimately may have little to no effect. Because there was a Yale immunologist, her name was Akiko Iwasaki, and she basically said that a large part of all these so-called vitamins and antioxidants, they don't necessarily do much, especially as Nova already said, if you're healthy, you don't really need to be taking any more than is necessary. Because if you take too much, it can actually cause an imbalance, which can actually screw your immune system more, as opposed to benefit it more. And she basically just said, for the vast majority of people, as long as you have enough sleep, exercise, eat a balanced diet, and try not to be stressed out, because obviously the more stressed you are, the lower your immune system gets, the more susceptible you are to taking this sort of stuff. So yeah, but the good news is there is apparently a current trial ongoing currently. I think it's been initiated within this last month, and they're testing whether antioxidant oral nutrition supplements will have an effect in reducing COVID or not. So that should be done at the end of this month. So that will be insightful, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting about antioxidants, because as well, from pharmaceutical side, there's hydrochloroquine, which is a malaria drug developed in the 80s, which is out of patent. It costs pennies. They discovered this using a process, I can't remember the exact name, but where they just test old drugs to see if they're effective against current viruses. And this drug, hydrochloroquine, was found to be very effective. You have Donald Trump, who announced that he used it or something like that. And then you have the pharmaceutical industry kind of trying to subvert that and act as though that hydrochloroquine doesn't work. I don't know if anybody has anything to say about hydrochloroquine. Has anyone heard of that?
I've heard of it, but yeah.
No, drop some details.
Yeah, apparently it's just really effective. My girlfriend's dad was diagnosed with COVID. He was quite sickly, and they gave him the hydrochloroquine. Well, they didn't actually. They were rushing it off the shelves. He has a contact who's a pharmacologist who was able to give it to him kind of, under the counter, let's say, discreetly. And let's not name any names. And he woke up the next morning and he felt much better. He was basically over it. So, yeah, suspicious about them subverting it. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that's just a conspiracy from, the weird side of the internet, let's say, where people are like, yeah, they're trying to subvert it. It's actually really powerful. But then, you did have Donald Trump using it, announcing it publicly.
It's one of those topics, though. It's just like, it's the thing with Corona. You're left in a state of perplexion because you don't know what is true, what is not true. And obviously, as you said before, which is a good point, where you question the media, like, what are they doing? Are they really giving an impartial verdict, or people are left thinking, what the hell? What am I supposed to do? Because you make a really good point, and you could also bring in your other point regarding placebo. How much of that is from hydrochloroquine actually helping support, or how much of that is because he has a belief in, a lot of the time just feeling, or just even if you're taking a placebo or something. But just regarding hydrochloroquine, apparently there was a study that went on the 5th of June in the United Kingdom, and they announced results. It was the largest trial that they did in regards to its use. And they did it in a group of 1,542 hospitalized patients treated with hydrochloroquine. 25.7% died after 28 days, compared with 23.5% in a group, in a controlled group. So there's a lot of sway,
Can you say where that what the source for that information was?
sciencemag.org.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
I for real thought you were just going to say science and just.
It's science, man.
But it's the thing with all of this sort of stuff. Like, you have an abundance of papers on one side proving X, and before you know it, you have the counter amount on the other side within a couple of weeks saying actually maybe it isn't this. So there's a lot of back and forth. But yeah, I'll forward you the stuff.
Yeah, I found the article. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the thing is with a lot of this stuff and a lot of kind of other conspiracies that I've looked into in my life, what kind of makes me struggle to accept the narrative often is this idea that people are corrupt, and you'll have facts that will contradict each other, and then if you can follow the money on one of them or on both of them, you'll get a clearer picture of who's funding this, what's the source of information, and do they have an interest. Like if I can draw a really simple example, is for example I know this one might trigger some people, but meat and dairy. So meat and dairy is massively subsidized in America by the Dairy Board, and there's like the Food and Drug Administration. All of these companies subsidize these industries, and they like basically falsify a lot of the studies to say like, yeah, dairy is actually really good for you. Yeah, meat's actually really good for you. Then they have like other studies which are done in different countries like the UK or Sweden or Japan, and those universities come up with completely contradictory information, and then you find out that apparently the information from the American side has been falsified to fit an agenda. So if you follow the money, you realize these scientists are funded by XYZ, and therefore these scientists, they go like, this is the result of my study. We found that, whatever, say meat and dairy is really unhealthy. And they go, yeah, well, that's going to be a problem because we've got loads of money invested in that. So can you falsify the data and make it look like meat and dairy is actually really good? And they'll be like, okay, I'll pay you a lot of money. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it,
Yeah, I think so too. It's money always makes it like, oh God, I can't explain myself. I'm thinking about what you are saying now, Insurrection, about the different science projects and like we discussing this here in our little forum, and we have like so many inputs and so many thoughts about it. I mean, this is not over yet. I waiting for some united what do you say, united picture of all this after it's over, because it's going to take a few years, and then we have a vaccine, and this is going to fall out again, and then the next virus is going to come, etc., etc. And I'm also thinking about China as a country, the transparency in their sources, in their I don't trust that country. I don't know why, but it's like they have so much businesses over the world. They are infiltrated in so much shit, and what they are doing in Wuhan, we don't know, and probably never will know, I guess. So yeah, it can be anything.
Yeah, it can be very insidious when they have a lot of business agendas and different industries. Like, what were they doing in that lab in Wuhan? Do they have a lab of virology in Wuhan? Well, supposedly they do. What were they doing there? Well, apparently
they have it is called like a the virologist in Wuhan that is in this institution. I have to see what it's called. God, I forgot. I zoned out when you guys started to talk about percentage here and there. I'm like, what? I haven't checked into the percentage. I'm going to come back at that and tell you what it's called.
Yeah, so I guess we can come back to those subjects. Another thing that I wanted to maybe move the conversation to, just to keep things spiced up, is well, should we do 5G first? This is going to be a controversial one, huh? So, where is this article I had? So this might puzzle people, this idea that could electromagnetic frequencies affect affect our body in this way. I mean, they're being rolled out. We have Wi-Fi in our homes. Is it possible that wireless radiation could affect the human body? Do we know enough about it?
I think it's safe to say that it most definitely can. Like, well, beings are made of energy. If you have something like that, it's definitely going to interfere with like the wavelengths that we give off. I mean, they set up 5G. I can't give you a name of the location, but they set up a 5G tower somewhere on this planet. As soon as they turned that shit on, you had animals dropping out of the goddamn sky just dead. So 5G is definitely something that needs to be studied. It needs to be looked into and broken down, and it really needs to be shown, like, you know, benefits versus, you know, positive effects of actually having this, because they haven't even like tested this shit. They're just setting up shop, and if you make a decision like that without having all the necessary information on whether or not it could potentially kill people, then, you know, you're making a big mistake.
Exactly. So 5G has a huge investment from the telecoms and technology industry, from Silicon Valley and all of that stuff. And it's being fast-tracked. These are the words of the politicians that are involved. They're fast-tracking it without doing any of the safety studies, because, well, we're going to make so much money doing this. We're not going to worry about the safety studies. I'd like to just paraphrase a little bit from this scientific paper. This is just from the abstract. It's published in the Journal of Biological Regulators and Homeostatic Agents. The abstract says, in this research, we show that 5G millimeter waves could be absorbed by dermatological cells, acting like antennas, transferring to other cells, and play the main role in producing coronaviruses in biological cells. DNA is built from charged electrons and atoms and has an inductor-like structure. This structure could be divided into linear, toroid, and round inductors. Inductors interact with external electromagnetic waves, move and produce some extra waves within the cells. So obviously very scientific, but yeah, I've been researching the impact of electromagnetic frequencies, and as you know, 5G is being rolled out massively around the world, and it's the same time that we get 5G that we get this coronavirus. So it's kind of suspicious. Like, is it possible that they're rolling out this technology and then like completely blissfully unaware that it's actually really harmful?
No, I think there's definitely a link, because I was listening to a podcast, Mysterious Universe. If y'all want to go check it out, it's some good shit. But I digress. But they were basically talking about how just like essential walking was like setting up 5G. So while everyone was in lockdown, you had people going up setting up 5G towers. There were some cases in, I don't know where, sorry, can't really quote names, but you had people just coming out of their houses at night, just setting fire to these goddamn towers and then getting fined like a shit ton of amount for like damaging government property. But why were they out there in the heart of a lockdown, a global lockdown, setting up 5G communication towers? How important is that? There's definitely something going on behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so down for having that conversation, but we are in a public forum, so I don't want to say anything too controversial. But yeah, what else does anyone else have to say?
From what I've read, I know there's a lot of skepticism and a lot of concern about 5G, and we've all seen those videos of the man driving past a 5G installment, and there's huge frequencies that he's detecting, or the videos of trees growing towards it or like dying essentially. But these are videos, right? And these are all like, they look scary, and I'm not disputing them, but they are anecdotal. And like from what I've read, the actual what's actually being emitted is actually within the same limits as mobile phones in the 1990s. So 1998, when mobile phones was first started being used, the levels of radiation that they were emitting. So in the case of like a mobile phone or a station, the actual emission is within the same kind of limits, and it actually hasn't exceeded the limits that were set in 1998. So I think there's cause for concern, and in particular with some of how with some of the actual companies themselves, how they're operating, how they're kind of doing things quickly. It's a lot of, obviously the correlation with coronavirus. That's an interesting topic. But I think in terms of actually how it is, it has been branded safe by the international body that kind of determines that, the name of which escapes me. I'll get that in a second. And as I said, the actual radiation being emitted is no greater than what mobile phones were emitting in the 1990s. So I think, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Thing is, this is smoking cigarettes was supported 100 years ago or whatever. This is the cigarettes that your dentist would smoke. And that was completely supported by science and by the governments. And then here we are, 100 years later, and we know that smoking is seriously bad for you, causes cancer, and we're trying to help people stop smoking. So is it possible that, maybe 100 years from now, we'll have this big wake up where we're like, oh my God, what were we doing to our bodies, dumping all of this wireless
100%, I do. I 100% agree with you that may very well be the case. We do not know the ramifications of widespread Bluetooth use, 3G, 4G, 5G, all of this stuff. We don't know it yet, right? It's going to happen soon, and we'll see the effects of it, the consequences. But my point was more in regards to 5G per se. 5G per se being an issue, when in reality the actual it's been proven the actual radiation that comes from 5G, either through your mobile device or from the actual stations themselves, is no greater than that of the phones and the technology from 1998.
So can I jump in here?
Yeah.
The saying is like, are they saying that the 5G is spreading a virus?
Are they saying that? The conspiracy people?
Yeah.
Well,
the radiation of this is spreading the virus. Is that what they are saying?
Okay,
we have to go basic with this.
There's two different fields. There's one group who say that the virus is, but that's more fringe. What's more of a popular opinion is that large amounts of wireless radiation impact the ability of the human body to function in certain ways, DNA reproduction, functions like, for example, oxygen absorption. The millimeter waves of 5G, 5 gigahertz up to 100 gigahertz, or up to 60 gigahertz, we're being told, but it's actually up to 100 gigahertz in some situations.
But I mean,
that impacts the ability to absorb oxygen in your body, which then can cause things like coronavirus to spread faster.
Okay. So it spreads fast. Yeah. I was just thinking, what the fuck are people saying? Yeah. Okay. Then I'm on the train and understand why they might think that. I'm thinking more like, I don't believe that. It makes it worse. It spreads faster. I do not. I go on the well-known things about viruses, that they are evolving and mutating and coming to more and more like this. Looking back, in the Spanish flu, 1918, stuff like that, we have, I don't know, I don't believe in the 5G thingy or in the, that's my view on that.
So I can post a couple of links. There's one website called bioinitiative.org. It's a collective of scientists who are publishing their data about electromagnetic radiation. And there's another account which I follow on Instagram called Wireless Health Risks, but they post a lot of really good information also about studies and information backing this up. This isn't just a handful of studies. This is dozens, if not hundreds, of different studies conducted by different scientists in different situations. A recent one I read yesterday was they exposed pregnant mice to 5G, and the control group were not exposed to any radiation. And the group that were exposed to 5G, the baby did not reproduce in the same way, had problems with the DNA. It came out very different than the control group, which wasn't exposed to radiation. So it kind of, okay, the coronavirus thing, is one thing, but is it possible that would you agree that electromagnetic radiation could be harmful to human bodies and to animals and to nature? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know if it's like, as I thought, they were thinking about spreading viruses and stuff like that. But that has to do with the health of all. Like, it doesn't have just to do with this virus.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to say encoded within the 5G radiation there is a virus that would happen wherever a tower goes up. That's a bit of a stretch, I agree.
But sorry to cut, just quickly. In that study they conducted with the mice, what kind of levels of radiation were these mice exposed to? Because as I said, no one's disputing that radiation can have an effect on you, right? No matter how big you are, humans, mice, whatever, it has the potential to change stuff about you, right? So I'd be curious to know what kind of levels of intensity were involved in that test.
Let me try and find the source.
No biggie now. It's just my point was I imagine, I could be wrong, but I imagine that the levels of radiation being used were quite high. I could be wrong, but if that's the case, it's also worth bearing in mind on the flip side. Again, the levels of radiation that you are going to be exposed to as a general mobile phone user using 5G are incredibly low. So it's just worth bearing that in mind.
I watched a documentary about 5G, and they had like the amplitude necessary to cause observable differences in DNA of things like trees and mammals and humans. And essentially it was like 0.0000000, like 1. That's enough to cause an effect on a human, on the DNA. And then you look, oh man, if I could find this graph, it was just mind-blowing. Or maybe I can find it and send it at some point, but it was mind-blowing because the amount of radiation needed to cause an adverse effect on DNA was tiny, like at 0 point something, and the effect that most Wi-Fi routers and 5G towers was in the hundreds, thousands, and sometimes tens of thousands. So hundreds and thousands of times more than is needed to cause some kind of adverse reaction.
I'd be really interested to see that. Yeah, that sounds kind of scary if that's the case.
So this brings us on to a really interesting point, guys. If all of us are awake to this, and if I'm able to some way convince you, or at least open you up to this openness of saying, oh, yeah, I'll research that. Sounds interesting what Phil's saying. Is he crazy? Maybe he's wrong. I don't know, but I'll research this. If a lot of people are open to this, how is it that as a society, as so many people in our world, we're just going along with this and not questioning it? Is that a problem in society, that people are just, marching along like, oh yeah, it's fine, I'm not worried?
Most definitely. Nowadays, most people are sheep. They don't question anything. They don't think more than 2 steps ahead of what they're going to have for breakfast. So there's no way they're going to be questioning things like this.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. My point is, anyone else has something to say about that sheep stuff?
I just want to quickly go back because I didn't get a say in the other one. What you originally said, but then I will quickly address what you just said. In regards to the 5G, does it not affect? There have been a lot of studies back and forth. So there have been some, I think Marshall raised the point that it can affect the millimeter wave lengths. It's been shown, or apparently it's a possibility that it can interfere with your wavelengths or something, and that can contribute to a deficient immune system. But then saying that there's also contrary evidence saying there's no evidence. 5G, as Jay raised the point, it has been shown that when it comes to the 5G rays, they're specified as non-ionizing radiation i.e. it's not powerful enough to penetrate and damage DNA. But then you raised a good point just now, where even if you have small doses of radiation, if that radiation is constantly around you all the time, every time, for a long duration, then surely that may, after a while have an effect as well. And one of the other research papers that I was reading as well spoke about a lot of these 5G studies are carried out in laboratories. So what may not be harmful in a lab, it may have a completely different effect when you put it out in reality, into the real world, because in a lab you have all the conditions at your disposal that you can change and maneuver at your liking. In the real world, that's a whole different thing, because there's a lot of criteria that you have to balance up and around. But yeah, it's a bit of back and forth. Just regarding the sheep thing, or sorry, could you just repeat the last question again, Philip?
I think I just basically said, how is it that if us as a small group of people were able to have a conversation and raise some points, how is it possible that so many people can just blindly be marching along to the same drum without any input?
I think it depends on the circumstances as well. So I think a lot of it will, and who you surround yourself with, the impact of social media, the influence that it can have on people, what they do, what they believe, what they don't believe. It is also very much kind of like a mob mentality. But again, if you're working a lot of the time, you take no notice, you just do what your government or your moral arbiters or the people in command say and do, and but I think for those who do invest time into looking into Corona, I think it's very important that when they do it, they need to do it to such an extent that they're not being completely susceptible to things like easy fake news, should we say.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to jump on to Jonathan. Jonathan wants to say something before he goes.
Yeah, no, apologies, guys. Just quickly, so my point would be, although people do tend to feign awareness of it and seemingly show no interest, even though we've, like you guys here, have made some really good points, highlighting the potential risks involved, how it could potentially affect your DNA, all this stuff, and other people, by and large, seem to not be aware of it or not really care. I think it is worth taking into account that 95% of the world's population are probably families who struggle to make ends meet, and they work all day, they come back, their priority when they come back home is their kids, and then they sleep, and it's pretty much rinse, repeat, ad infinitum. And these kind of people who make up the majority of the world tend to rely on what they see is what they get in terms of news, in terms of information, right? So that's TV, it's social media, that kind of stuff. I think if there were, as Aspects has touched on multiple times, a kind of global awakening, and this links in, I think, with social media needing a bit of a paradigm shift. Alternative sources need to be kind of brought to the front a bit more, made more readily available for these people who otherwise just don't have the time, or just don't have. It's not a possibility for them to kind of learn the stuff that we are learning, divulging with one another. So I think it's important to know, to factor that into the equation. I think people want to know, by and large. I think people want to know, and they'd be really interested to know this stuff. But for many, it's just not a possibility with how media is currently being churned out and who controls the media.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I have one thing to say to that, and it's in the world of information. I mean, being ignorant, it's a choice. No one's like, you have a phone, which is essentially a mini computer in your pocket, right? So you could pull that stuff out and just do your own research. I think that's a big problem, is that people don't look into
No, it's
things
true.
themselves.
Definitely there is a case of ignorance. People might just don't want to know. But on the other side, there is a case of when the media is so desperately pushing an argument, a specific argument or a specific belief, and it's all over the media, and all you see is what you get, right? And some people just don't know. Like a lot of cases, people are blissfully unaware. So, for example, when I learn something new, if one of you guys tell me something that I never knew before, it's a case of, wow, I never knew that. I'm gonna search that, right? So these kind of people that do want to know, if only they have that all it takes is one opportunity, one little instigator for them to go onto that journey of like discovery. That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's really good points. Thank you for making them, guys. Does anyone else have something to say on the subject?
I just wanted to butt in really quickly, just regarding like basically what they both said, which are good points. It's also like the biases of media as well. So obviously they will push out certain narratives, whether it's to invoke some sort of moral hysteria, moral panic among the people. And like Aspect said, to some degree, yeah, it is a choice to be ignorant. But at the same time, I would also be very wary, again, of the platforms that people tend to go to when they want to actually get a proper understanding of what is being discussed. So, for example, Corona, whether the sources that they go to themselves also have to be up for debate. For example, are they going to Nature, British Medical Journal, legit sources made by people that have expertise, or are they just going to conspiracy sites or things like YouTube where a lot of people can have a say and they can be very good sophists and say and talk the talk, but in terms of actually providing real evidence, not so much so. But yeah,
I see your point. Research really comes down to citing multiple different sites, anything you could get your hands on, and then if you see the same thing coming up in multiple different areas, chances are it's legit. But if you see shit falling off, it's just not proven.
Well, that's the thing though, like if you look at hydrochloroquine, it should be a simple example because, I mean, the President of the United States took it because he said it's going to help. But then if you look at, for example, The Guardian, they have a headline, World Health Organization says trial of these drugs don't cut hospital deaths. Then, you've got another headline from the Daily Mail say 50% fewer patients died when treated with hydrochloroquine. So it seems like you've got a consensus, a lot of people agreeing on something, and all it takes is for those one or two sources to contradict that, and suddenly the public faith in that whole subject kind of gets shattered, right? I mean, if you had 10 people saying the sky is blue, but then one person going the sky is red, you'd be like, maybe the sky is red. Isn't that so crazy? How it's just like one or two sources can kind of go in and fool you. And kind of what Jonathan was saying about how a lot of people are families and they just come home and all they just spend time with their family, eat, and then they're going to go to work the next day. If you look at some of these kind of documentaries that talk about the financial system, the Federal Reserve and everything, it seems like it was more, the American dream, for example. The American dream is essentially being sold a lie to put you into a position where you have to work to pay for your house, to pay for your car, to pay for all these things. When, like, humans in nature, how we've been for thousands of years, we've been hunter-gatherers, where you didn't have to go to work. You'd go, trade some of the things that you've grown with your neighbor, and you'd get by like that. Okay, obviously times were much more simple then, but maybe this whole kind of this is how society has kind of just grown and grown and grown into this enormous monstrosity where like things like this can happen, and because of the internet and because of the spread of information, these things just kind of go out of control in this way. I don't know if that makes any sense. Marshall, do you want to say something?
Well, back to like the topic of money. Just we've become a slave to it. We've moved from what we used to be into what we are now, which is conformity. So that's no bueno. But when it does come to the coronavirus, I do want to point out, like, it's a problem and solution method, or it could be seen as a problem solution method. So you got a problem, right? You make a problem. You throw the entire world in chaos, unbalance, and you intertwine death in that. So then people are dropping by the thousands. You give it a few months, then people will become desperate for a solution. And if you be like, hey, I got a solution for you, a vaccine, so to say, but you just have to give me your free will. Like, get rid of that and you can have it. People are going to jump on the wagon because they'd rather not face death. Even though it's inevitable, it comes for all of us. People just like to prolong the inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of part of this illusion we've been sold, which is you have to go make money to survive, to, you know, pay the bills, and it just puts you into this endless loop where, you know, your life flashes in front of your eyes, and then you're 65 and you retire, which just seems to be something that we're kind of all waking up to. Which, I mean, that would be a great subject for another talk. The American dream, is it a big scam? But maybe let's keep on COVID. I don't know how much. Anyone? Yeah, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about the economy and stuff like that when our countries got to know about this virus, when it's starting the shutdowns and the lockdowns and everything like that, the panic, how we're going to do, we have to make money, etc., etc. Sweden had a controversial way of doing this. We don't have lockdowns. We didn't have lockdowns. We had just like recommendations from our Swedish public health authority. They were talking about herd immunity and stuff like that, and trying to not disturb the economy as much. And Sweden has from the beginning, years ago, we are like a people that are pretty calm when it comes to stuff. We reason about things, we don't panic easy, etc., etc. But this time with this virus, it came like a panic, and everybody's like money, and yeah, I don't know. We will see. We have so much countries that are think that Sweden's way of handling things are devastating, but we haven't seen the result of it yet. So yeah.
Can I just come in? Because I don't know, my friend from the Netherlands said the thing with people in Sweden is that they are like kind of taught by those in charge, like you go by your own common sense. So like if you're not well, you stay at home. And I think a lot of it is just how people respect others, whereas we see like in other countries, I understand because they've been on lockdown for so long, and here in New Zealand it's not been as severe, but now they all seem to just be taking a really relaxed approach, and they don't seem to be taking any like responsibility. So yeah, it's just funny how different cultures, even here in New Zealand, like, okay, it was only a small population of 5 million, but everyone just seemed to have trust in Jacinda. And I think that's another point. Some of these leaders, like we've seen in the UK, people feel like, was it Boris Johnson, feel like he didn't really act quick enough and whatnot. And then he's the one who came and got sick. So I think some of it's like fear mongering amongst people, and then some of it is just like a lot of people don't have any trust in their leaders, and then they take things into their own hands. And then, like Philip said, then they start like looking at conspiracies and what it could be and what it couldn't be. Because it is, I mean, I do think there is an actual virus, but there is something behind it, like to try and control everybody and whatnot.
Yeah. Are they trying to control us? That's the big question. Is it a big scam? I mean, I suggested the title for the talk to be, serious pandemic or elaborate hoax. Not because I actually think it's a hoax. I know there is a virus, and I know there are people dying. So it's not, like like everything is like a big kind of lie. But there are big parts of it that do make you kind of question it. Like, for example, I don't know if you've seen some pictures circulating on the internet of CNN news reporters going to hospitals and filming footage of like dummies with the faces censored, and then like monitors that should have the heart rate that are switched off. Then they're like, yeah, there's lots of people in these hospitals. They're all really sick and they're all really dying. It's like, no, they're not. They're dummies, and they've got their faces censored, which just makes this whole thing like completely unbelievable. But then again, maybe they're doing that for a reason, so that the news reporters don't actually have to go into the hospitals. So they made a set. But then, see, that's just so dishonest, because that's just going to foster more like disbelief in the in the media. People are going to they're lying to us, isn't it?
But then I also think it puts a bit
Always
of
media.
reliance and dependence on them as well, because a lot of people aren't going to put in that extra time, especially as Jay said, if they've got family, if they're working 8 to 10 hours plus a day. They won't have the spare time. They might look at something like Daily Mail, The Sun, or whatever to get some mainstream news, and it's in their interest as well. The more catchy the title, the bigger the death rate or whatever, the more people will watch their stuff, the more shares it'll get, the more revenue they get. So from a business point of view, it's good for them. In terms of like media reliability, I think it's already at an incredibly high low. And I think that's why a lot of people go to alternative sites like YouTube, Facebook. But the only problem with that is there's been many reports showing that if you rely heavily on things like YouTube or Facebook for your main social media source of information, you're more likely to be brought into conspiracy theories and what is true, what isn't true, and before you know it, you're on that train of questioning basically everything. So
I mean, if I can take that to like a spiritual level, which is what I've been discovering about myself recently, and that's that I think, I don't know if other people have the same experience. I feel like I've got an intuitive sense, like a gut feeling. When I hear information, for me, like it very quickly just settles in me as that's true, that's not true. I know some people might be like, yeah, that's just you're trusting your fairy tale head. And yeah, maybe I am. But for me, like my intuitive sense for a lot of these things, like it does add up. A lot of these dots, as I said, when you start connecting the dots, like you do start forming a story. Like we know that, for example, I'm going to go back to the paedophilia thing because I think it's important and it is blowing up on social media right now. We had Jimmy Savile, who was a kids entertainer in the UK for so many years. He was given an OBE by the Queen. He was protected by the Queen. They were very good friends. And then when he dies, all of these reports come out of loads of children in the hospitals, orphans and stuff like that, underage girls in really like vulnerable people. And he was going in there and molesting them in their hospital beds. And this whole thing was completely covered up by the media. There was loads of reports. It was only after he died that this stuff came out. So are we just, what is going on? What is going on? How are people just so blind to just let this stuff happen and just be like, yeah, whatever,
I think it was like what you and I were talking about this the other day, and I think, like you said, it's slowly being like uncovered by like judges and whatnot. And there is some, I don't know if everyone believes it, but I do think there is some sort of like secret society, and it is very dark and deep. And I think I don't believe that the whole of the world was unprepared for this pandemic. Like you said, considering that coincidentally the movie or the series came out pandemic just as everything was blowing off on Netflix. I don't believe that nobody knew. I think there is people who know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's going to happen with the economy, and there is a lot of weird things happening, like you said with Prince Andrew. It's all like a big cover up, and people can afford to do this. There are some people who are like behind the scenes, who are very dangerous and very powerful, and they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to work people, how to put fear. It's all about putting fear into people, and then they're looking for someone to tell them what to do. They're looking for like leadership and whatnot. And then, like you said, we're blindsided by what's really happening, what's really going on with these like paedophiles and whatever. So yeah, it is a cover up for something, but I do think the virus is real.
Yeah.
It's definitely covering up something bigger.
Yeah. I think it is indicative. It demonstrates that there's more dots that you need to connect. And again, I'd go back to this thing because David Icke says I'm the dot connector, and it makes sense when you start connecting the dots. It forms a bigger picture as opposed to each of these facts in a vacuum. I'd like to maybe suggest a little activity, guys. If you could be my fact checkers, I'm going to spell out approximately the agenda of the globalist elite, and you just tell me if any part of this it seems like completely nonsense, or if maybe little parts of this kind of add up, right? So apparently the agenda of these elites, who are supposedly satanic pedophiles, Satan worshipping pedophiles, or reptilians, as David Icke suggests, their agenda is to enslave all of humanity using whatever resources they have, which includes stuff like vaccination, includes stuff like putting chips in people, so that when you have this chip, all of your movements are registered. If you break the rules, if you dissent the government, like in 1984, or like in China with the credit system, if you do anything against the system, then you're crossed off. You can't use your money. Like that's the case in China. You can't travel if you've got your credit score too low. And yeah, they're trying to enslave all of humanity and turn us into a sheep race. Does this seem like a totally crazy conspiracy theory? Or in 2020, are we getting to that point where little bit, this generation, us, we're roughly, 20s to 30s, whatever age we are, we're kind of like, a lot of this resonates. I can't see this as being just a big coincidence. It doesn't seem like a coincidence anymore. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think there's any such thing known as a coincidence. That's just a concept we've come up with trying to make things easier. I wouldn't go as far to say that, we're about to all be enslaved by some lizard people from space. I mean, it's a possibility. I'm not going to dismiss it, but I really think anything is possible. So just don't dismiss what has the slightest inkling of making sense over anything. You have to consider everything. Consider all your options. Plan for eventuality. Don't dismiss anything.
Right, which seems to... Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, it's just possible.
Which seems to be the case with people right now is when you suggest to them, kind of normies, as we might call them, if you suggest to a normie like, oh, your face mask doesn't help, the media is lying to you, their immediate response is, no, you're wrong. Just get very offended by even the suggestion of having to dig a bit deeper and change their opinions. People can't take that they're wrong. People can't take that they might have to dig a bit deeper and find different facts.
I think a lot of it is the fear as well. If you've believing in one person or one government, and then other people are coming. This is what has been happening with the virus, and other people coming out with these conspiracies. And there's a lot of like truth behind them. You're going to get really scared, aren't you? Because you're going to think, oh my God, what's going on? Who can I trust? And I think this is a scary thing. These people who we've put in charge are the ones who are like covering up so much dark secrets and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or they have to be united, what they go out with, what they are saying and what they are telling us, so they don't create like more panic than it's going to happen anyway. So yeah.
But then also like how much of it is just based largely around something unknown that hasn't happened in a while, and people, governments and whatnot it's kind of like a new phenomenon for them as well. So it's kind of learning by experience. So whereas some, for example, like the UK, can be argued put in restrictions, quarantine measures too late, and you had others that were as you said, like regarding Sweden, maybe Japan, Vietnam definitely, who put in the good restrictions. to just play it out by ear. A lot of these people are also experimenting and just seeing what is the most effective method as well. So yeah.
If I can jump in, I'm still like this basic person. Then me for myself believe that this virus and the spreading of it. This time, I don't know how it spread, but it spread to different parts of the world that the former viruses haven't spread. As say for the dengue fever, for example, that is mostly Africa. Ebola, also mostly Africa, and I mean the SARS and the MERS, that was a MERS-CoV. That was a virus that had a deadly mortality percent of 30 to 40%. That was in Saudi Arabia in 2012. There are many of these viruses that aren't as hyped as this COVID are, but it also spread in the countries that the other viruses has not spread as much. So why? I want to go to the basics. How is it possible that this virus, if it started in China, how did it come out? That is my wondering. I want to find a realistic solution on that. That is how I feel for it.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Why was it suddenly in so many places? And I remember Ebola and Zika viruses, when that whole thing was happening, or
SARS,
bird flu, they contained them really fast, didn't they? I mean, we were alive at that time. That was, 10 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. And it kind of happened a couple of weeks. It was on the news. It blew over really fast. And here we've got this COVID who came out of nowhere and, suddenly the whole world went into a lockdown.
But in 2018, this virologist, as I said, I typed her in the, I don't think I typed her name. I typed the Wuhan Institute of Virology. At 2018, this virologist was warning people in her organization about the mutation of certain viruses, etc., in bats. So I mean, I don't know if Wuhan or China has like a center point in this. I can stretch to what the fuck, did the bat come out that was contaminated, or what the fuck happened? I don't know. Like, nature has its way.
Yeah,
or
it's weird.
It's a way of controlling the whole world, isn't it? Like some of these other viruses have come out, but they've only kind of been dominant in certain countries. This seems to have affected the whole world. And what Patrick was saying, I agree. Everyone has like a different response to something, but also the friend that I was staying with who had views about it, she said the reason why some of these leaders seem to be like incompetent and incapable is actually like they knew that the whole coronavirus wasn't a big deal. They knew that it was like being blown out of proportion. So I suppose they were maybe taking a realistic approach in their eyes, but the media painted them out to look like really irresponsible and like uncaring.
True.
Right. So, I mean, that kind of brings us to the point where it's a little bit like, okay, we've talked about all of these things. Can we try to formulate what feels a bit like a solution in some way? And, I think my sense, which is, that's what I've been thinking about, like, okay, we've got this big problem. What can we do? And I think it does revolve around this idea that we need to take away trust from these institutions like the media and the governments, because we've been lied to and deceived by them so many times. I mean, we're stupid to continue, following in those footsteps. Like, they're fucking taking the piss. Let's be honest here. And we need to, as it's already happening, we have a lot more focus on decentralized kind of sources of information, independent journalism, which is fantastic. There still is an issue where now there's so many different sources. It's, as I said earlier, like 10 people say the sky is blue, one person says the sky is red. Suddenly I've fostered a tiny little bit of doubt maybe hydrochloroquine is bad, which, if you look at it, it seems to be a lot of these, like, what was it? It was I have these here. So yeah, the Daily Mail one said 50% fewer patients died of hydrochloroquine. Then Guardian says these drugs don't cut hospital deaths. So, what's going to be the solution? I think the solution is going to be when we can get to a place where people can have a reliable source of information which is unobstructed and from reputable sources and doesn't have an agenda, which is, I think, really, really the problem right now, is that
It's a public
so many
service,
of these...
you mean?
Yeah, a public service without an agenda, because even the government, they've got an agenda. They're kind of, they're being lobbied. Look at like how all the American politics works. You have these institutions who are basically tipped off to speak in a certain way. It's like, all right, so Shell and Esso are going to sponsor your fight, Joe Biden, or I don't know, whatever. They're going to sponsor you to get, to run as president. Oh, but you have to construct a new pipeline. So no matter how good your intentions are, you never get anything done because, well, you're funded by someone and you have to bend the knee to whatever your sponsor says.
Yeah, no, I think it's an admirable thing, an admirable aim, for sure. It's just, I kind of feel like, how long is that neutrality going to last until they need, funds or money, and they can get them, but they need to, maybe put a slight turn on the way that they talk about this or that, or do you get what I mean? So there's always going to be some sort of risk of susceptibility, and I like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm all for the media being held to account, especially regarding like unnecessary panics, bad reporting, bad journalism in general, especially when it can be harmful in the process. But it's just, I guess, like, how do you go about that? That's what
Yeah. I would like to be able to put more trust in the WHO. I would like them to be to feel like they are super public service, and that people should like follow the recommendations, and if everybody did that, etc., etc. But that's not how it works. And also another thing I'm thinking about this virus is that we now have, I mean, in the spread of it can have like, we travel a lot. We have super open societies now. We are open, every stores, everything is open 24/7. We are more people. In let's say in China, they are so crowded. They are like, and we travel a lot. We are more moving more, and we have like more open society now. Back like in ages ago in Sweden, we have like never been super crowded, but now we have a bit of a new world. We have a bit of a new way of living. We are tighter. We are more people in one apartment, more people in one house, and etc., etc. And the spread is like just what I said: traveling and people not being home when they are sick. When we stop doing stuff like that, I mean, at the Stone Age, I think there was a reason why people didn't travel over to the other side of because they got sick. Do you guys know what I'm meaning? It's like, I don't know. Everything goes so fast.
The spread of diseases, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And how it goes so fast. Maybe it's like a combination of everything that we have been talking about today here. And then it gets panic when our countries that almost never have weird diseases get hit. Then it's like, oh my God, like that. And other countries that are used to it, like take Asians, for example, they know exactly immediately when a virus is out, how they're going to correct it. I mean, people standing outside a rented building, they have guards taking their fever. They have to protect themselves. They can't mingle. They just go straight to job and home, etc., etc., like that. It's no problem there. And so I don't know. Maybe it's we're just shocked of this because it's gonna come like crossover virus are gonna be like mutated and stuff like that. This is evolution, guys. I think it's like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, it resonates with me. Like, look at how you had the people coming to America, or the colonizers or whatever, and they brought them blankets with smallpox and, you know, wiped them out.
Yeah.
Or the fact that apparently those peoples didn't have tooth plaque. That bacteria didn't exist in the Americas, and apparently it was the Europeans coming that brought that bacteria that causes plaque on the
Really?
teeth. Yeah, I heard that.
Cool.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Can I just say what Nova was saying with the WHO? It's interesting, that theory, because that's what I've heard, is that it's this whole coronavirus is just an attempt to kind of have one leader in the world and get everybody under the control. So if anything, that really makes sense why we have the World Health Organization stepping in, and literally everyone across the world is having to listen. So it does sort of support everyone's idea that there is something deeper behind all of this.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the World Health Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations. They have an army. The Trilateral Commission, which is trying to band together politics. They've already established it with the European Union. And then they were trying to do the TTIP, Transatlantic Trade International Partnership, which was trying to band America and Europe together. So that's their agenda, is to have a one world government, right? I mean, is this still something that people are debating? I think either people know about it and know that it's happening, or they're trying to happen, they're attempting to do this, or people just don't know about it at all. Because it seems like once you know this information, once you start connecting the dots, it's you know, it's kind of unrefutable. Maybe 10 or 20 years ago it was a bit different, but now a lot of this has come out.
We can thank Corona for this, that we have been enlightened, that everything is not black and white. It's like exactly, Bethany Ann, what I was saying, would be so nice to have like an organization that we could trust, that did it without any winning. Like, wow, okay, this is the most healthiest thing to come through this.
But I don't think we're ever going to have that. I think everything's corrupt, and I think even like some of these celebrities, and they would post things like stay inside, or they mysteriously got the virus. I don't know if any of that's true, or like Philip was saying, you're all part of this organization, like there's like the Illuminati, and whether you like it or not, you have to go along with it. And maybe that's why some of the leaders like Boris Johnson delayed everything, because maybe he thought, like, he knew it was all like kind of a hoax. But I think right now people have to just trust themselves and go by their own, like Philip said, go by your own instinct, and that's it.
Can you ever disprove if you're deep into conspiracy theories? Because if you have a narrative that you really strongly believe, even in the face of contrary data that may say otherwise, can you ever break out of that mindset, or is it worth breaking out of that? Do you get what I mean? Because, or would it just be another case of, well, you have to look at who funded the study, who made the study?
I would be so happy to be able to get my head out of this and not believe it. I mean, it's the same thing like veganism. I know I bring it on, but for me it seems like quite a simple subject to debate, because I would love to be able to go back and have a chicken burger and have cheese and have, you know, mac and cheese and stuff, you know, like, wow, that sounds delicious. But I've just heard so much information. I've gone so far down the rabbit hole. There is no turning back for me. I don't think I could, you know, have a KFC. It would just, I just wouldn't, like, my brain wouldn't allow it to happen. I think that kind of might be the case of conspiracy. I mean, I wish something came out and was like, hey, all of the stuff you've read on the internet is total bullshit. Go back outside, play kick a ball, and, you know, have fun with your friends and just have a happy time. But, you know, if you look at the history books, you know, look at Napoleon, look at the World Wars, look at the invasion of America. You know, this stuff has been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. You know, Babylon. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it would be nice if this wasn't true, but I think it just demonstrates the nature of the human experience is that we are quite flawed beings. We have a lot of shortcomings, and until we kind of accept that and learn to bring that in check and say, okay, if I have a bit of a traumatic experience, if somebody fucks me up in my life, I might go around killing people. Yeah, that might happen. You know, people very similar to me have done that. So let's be honest, that could happen to me. And just be really like, honest about it and say, okay, how can we build a way of living in this world where we won't be so, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable to these kinds of things where we could say,
Greedy.
yeah, how can we kind of learn to stop being greedy? And so
But then,
flawed.
no, because I think I don't see it as a bad thing. And as Nova said, if anything, this whole thing has exposed just how corrupt accounts of COVID and whatnot can be. And it is, in my opinion anyway, it is very healthy to question those giving you commands and telling you this and that, just to get on board, and if anything, to be proactive, to, like Bethany Ann said, take it upon yourself to look into it. Stop being so reliant on the public services and people telling you. That's not to say completely disregard what they may say, but just be open to being somewhat skeptical at times as well. So I do find that to be healthy. But
Yeah, a healthy dose of skepticism. I mean, I'm always like that. If somebody can convince me to the contrary, I'm very happy to have a conversation. I think that's a good way to be. I mean, I felt kind of bigging myself up, but always be open to hearing an opposing point of view, and then also by engaging into that debate, into that conversation, it equips you to understand your own arguments better. For example, I've started writing just to kind of express my thoughts and try and get on paper. And you realize that by writing and trying to learn to express your thoughts, you become better at expressing those thoughts, so you can actually debate better. Whereas if you're not engaging in a conversation with people and you're just in your head the whole time, you're not going to be able to actually think in a way, because you're not actually practicing the act of having your thoughts challenged, which I think is really important. It seems to be like something that's happening in our society where people just aren't being encouraged to actually challenge themselves. We're in a very kind of basic, like, look at the education system. It's just like 1 + 1 = 2, red, green, yellow. Okay, go out and, work in a shop now, bye. What happened in universities? We used to challenge people in universities. Now universities are just big social justice warrior creation factories. But I mean, I feel like all of these subjects are connected, so I feel like I'm kind of going off on a tangent. But I mean, that's kind of how I kind of planned out this talk. Was, there are a lot of different connecting parts to the debate, and just going on something very simple like, do masks work, or do lockdowns work? That's just part of the debate. Like, what's actually the bigger picture right now is that we have kind of a dumbed down society who, are just so busy working and trying to put bread on the table that they're not capable of actually challenging the media. And even if you wanted to, let's just say we all came together and said, let's overthrow this system, let's have an insurrection. What do we actually do? We'd all get ourselves killed if we actually tried to have an actual revolt. It's kind of like in V for Vendetta. They will go and go out onto the streets and kind of make their voices heard. They're marching behind one kind of marching behind the beat of one drum. For right now, it's like, could we do that, or would there be too much infighting? Like, look at Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in America. They're like, yeah, we're going to take over Seattle. We're going to run our own little constituency. And what happened? There was just so much infighting. They were all just beating themselves up because they couldn't agree on something.
No, I completely agree. But the thing I'd also say is you need to have like some sort of concrete proof that it's being used against you. That as we've discussed, that it's all a setup, that it's this, that it's that. Because the problem is that can kind of tie in closely with like some sort of anarchy where you're just taking the law in your own hands undemocratically, and maybe to some you could argue, maybe it could be argued that's a good thing, especially in the face of such injustice and manipulation and corruption going on. But at the same time, you need, do you get what I mean? There needs to be some sort of core proof that people can rally around without the need for infighting, that they know this is, yeah, this is going down a bad route. We need to do this. Because the problem is, if you start adopting that sort of methodology where we just get a mob rule to fight up against this, then before you know it, society to some degree starts falling to shit. You don't have any sort of policies or any sort of law or legislations in place, and even if it turns out to be you overthrow the established order or whatnot, then people can take it upon themselves, form their own groups to do the exact same thing.
What would be the order that would then supersede that? It's kind of like Jordan Peterson. He says, these kind of people who are protesting and trying to, let's take down the patriarchy. It's like, this is a very big, complicated system. How do you think you're sufficiently equipped to replace a very big, difficult to manage system?
Agree. That's been in place for decades and decades, or even longer today.
It's arrogant,
basically. It's very selfish.
And the other, that also kind of extrapolates out to the fact that we're so out of touch with nature. I kind of mentioned hunter-gatherers before, but how we live right now is just so out of the way that we've lived for generations before that. We're so arrogant to think that we can supersede this natural order when actually, when we do it, have our own kind of order. We end up getting sick, we have depression, we have viruses, we have climate change and stuff.
We are our own viruses to humankind. We are we're just destroying shit. We're destroying ourselves, and that's go faster and faster and faster. So I agree.
But I was thinking it the other day, and I was thinking, people moan about if there is some secret society or whatever. But is the world in that bad a place? Because sometimes I think I have a really bad perception of it, but that's only when I look on the media and whatnot, and I think every now and then something goes wrong. But I think I feel like the majority of people feel they're quite sheltered and safe. They can go home, go to their job, and they're protected. So maybe they think, I don't really care, there's something deep going on. If it's working, then
I think the social media definitely plays its part, and it obviously exacerbates things on a huge level. Philip, you talking before, you just raised the point of SJWs, unis, and this. How much of that would really have been given much of a platform had they not had the use of things like Twitter or Facebook to spread their hatred or whatever? Maybe if they have good points, or maybe if they don't, but I highly doubt it would have got to the stage where it's in people's faces so abruptly without the use of social media. So when Leanne raises that point, I think it's a fair one.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've gone for quite a while, guys. It's been very interesting having this talk.
Can I just make one point quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just feel like with all of these events, I feel like you said connecting the dots, and I feel like even with the whole BLM and how that followed with the coronavirus and people not having faith in their leaders and then taking things into their own hands, lots of people weren't even listening to the advice they were given. They decided to keep their children out of school and whatnot. I just feel like it's all leading up to something. I don't know if you feel the same, because I know you're you trust your instincts. But I think there's definitely a bigger picture. And I think, what is it leading up to? Like the beginning of a new age or the rise of something, you know?
Well, I mean, if you want to get into the spiritual connection, which is another field I'm interested in, it seems like we're currently experiencing a split in timelines. So, you know, this multiple timeline theory, it basically says how, you know, say you're walking down a path and you turn left and you turn right. At that point, you've created two parallel universes, one in which you did turn left and one in which you did turn right. And these infinite amount of timelines, we're constantly flowing in and out of them, right? Right now, if I went through my worst life for the next 10 years, I could become, say, a homeless drug addict. I could ruin all my friendships, right? Parallel to that would be maybe my best life, where I could become successful, rich, happy, and have lots of friendships and have a happy family, right? So every decision I make that will lead me in either of those directions creates an infinite amount of different timelines, right? So are you on board with that so far? Now, what's happening in our world seems to be that there's all of these infinite timelines are splitting apart into two parallel timelines. One is where the world goes into darkness, and one is where the world goes into light. The world in darkness is where the New World Order does take over. It does kind of destroy humanity, and we're all chipped and vaccinated, and we're all mindless slaves to a system, and there's depopulation, and Bill Gates is the king of the world, and the Illuminati and all that shit, right? And then in the parallel is where we somehow manage to wake up as a civilization. We realize what's been going on, that there's some insidious things going on in deep systems, and that we have to band together as people and overthrow the system that doesn't work and actually work together as human beings. And I think that these two timelines are splitting right now. And that's, as you said, Bethany, and I feel that as well, that it's something is bubbling to the surface. And I think it's that split. And your consciousness, your decisions that you go through in your life are going to put you in one path or the other. Are you going to help people? Are you going to be kind? Or are you going to, you know, make things worse?
So like a battle between the good and evil.
Yeah, very much.
Coronavirus has really shown, like, some people have really shown their true colours in terms of like survival of the fittest. You see when people go around getting loads of shopping and stuff, and others have like really shown how kind they are and whatnot as well.
Yeah, helping out neighbours.
People.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So
Great conversation.
Yeah. So I think probably have to call it there, because I know a few of us have to go.
Yeah, it's bedtime.
So
2 hours, guys.
Just to close up, just a quick firing question. COVID-19 or insurrection, conspiracy or not? What would you say?
I think it's not an elaborate hoax, but an elaborate, masterful, evil plan by some elite cabal. Yeah, I don't think it's a naturally formed virus. I think the evidence points against that. I think it's a man-made virus. I think the lockdowns seem to have been a political move to destroy small businesses. We didn't really talk about that. But the corporations are the ones that have enough cash flow to survive this kind of thing. It's a lot of the small businesses that are suffering the most. I think there is something insidious. I don't think it came out of nowhere. I think it came out of a lab. The evidence points to that. So I do think it's something insidious. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Nova? Do you take that approach, or do you think there's just...
I don't think it's a hoax overall. I'm thinking like this. I think this there's definitely nothing, stuff that we don't know that is laying behind all the, not the spreading, but the media and everything like that, and how they handled this virus. And if it's something that isn't nature done, it is from a lab or something like that, then also the SARS and the MERS and the other corona kind of thingies that have started from those places, they also are tampered with in that case. So I want to like rest on my belief, and this is a virus, then the spread of it, I can't say if it's a hoax totally, but something is lying behind it, of course. But
Okay.
in the bottom, it's a virus that came to us.
Hmm.
And what do you think, Bethany? Do you think it's a virus, or do you think that it's like some sort of ploy by mysterious peoples behind who we don't know anything about?
I think whether it's natural or not, it's been used as a great opportunity for manipulation and control. And it's, like Philip said, a way of getting rid of all the small businesses and then everyone giving power to the big corporations and whatnot.
Okie doke. So,
Yeah.
thanks
Well,
everyone.
Patrick, what about what's
sorry.
your answer for the question? I didn't hear your 2 cents.
I'm open in regards to both. I would want some sort of more concrete proof or some sort of expose showing these people in power. That's not to say I don't question that there could be some, as you say, elite cabal working behind the scenes, like some sort of X-Files thing. But again,
Nice.
yeah.
Well,
Let's just say I'm taking a bit of everyone's input and
that's
just
good.
conjuring over in my brain just to see. But yeah,
That's good. Keeping a balanced kind of perspective. Yeah.
that's how we rock and roll in this day and age. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks
Thank
for
you.